Nishtha, if I could start with a couple of questions and then open it out. This film was made in 2004, and your bio also says that you're interested in the politics of image making and the nature of memory. So looking at this film now, where we are today with cameras and which have phones which have cameras, and looking back at this film, how do you think the politics of image making has changed, and what has that done to memory today?
And what is that?
What is that doing to the nature of memory?
I'm not really going to comment on how the politics of image making has changed, and I think at a sort of fundamental level, I wouldn't say that, I mean, how we look at the politics of image making would have changed very much, but what Nishtha spoke of earlier, the ease of taking photographs and your own, this film has a lot to do with fantasy. And I think at one point in the film, what we're exploring is how very devastating reality intrudes into the photo studio, which was a place of fantasy. Or, well, it ends up shutting down the photo studio for a while, and the photographer is out there dealing with another kind of image altogether. That is one aspect of it, but when it comes to fantasy and image making for yourself, I think a lot of the kind of things that people are able to do, which they had to go into a studio to be able to do, that has changed. And beyond that, well, I think that'll take us into a completely different zone. I have no expertise in the matter. Deepti, you want to say anything?
As far as politics of image making is concerned, I think the film also deals with it, and most of my films deal with it, and they try to address this question of the power between the filmmaker and the subject, and it makes you aware, and it definitely makes the viewer aware that here in this particular case, we could be either, in many ways could be a voyeur or could be laughing, or in other, this is an easier situation where it is relevant, but in other films, I always make the, it apparent that, hello, this is a mediated reality. And that is a very important thing. That, unless it starts, I mean, of course it's real, but it is still a mediated reality. People are still performing themselves. I mean, each of these characters are giving an impression of themselves, and they're very aware that there is a camera. So that awareness is very important, that they are performing for the camera, and that element is always there, unless there is candid photography. But the moment people realize that there's a camera, then there is this consciousness that is there. And in all my work, that is very important to establish that. So I don't want people to think that there's a hidden camera or anything like that. And actively or passively, the films are actually talking about the politics. And in this film, it's very clear. In the end, we talk about the politics of the famine image. And what kind of, although it's interesting because he's trying to, he's actually making a very cynical photograph of the famine victims. But the process of having taken that photograph would have shown how, his sensitivity in one way is also accompanied by an insensitivity, which is very much part of filmmaking. And so the awareness is very important. I think that's all. I mean, more than that, we cannot do much as filmmakers. So.
This is a question for, in fact, any of you. When you speak about how you looked at sort of analog filmmaking, photography in this film, and now we've progressed almost entirely into digital, and I can, pick up my smartphone today and take a photograph or even make a little film and put it out on the internet and have it seen. Do you think that signals sort of the end of the craft of framing a shot and taking a shot sort of carefully and the aesthetics of it? Because now I can just do anything I want. It's so open.
Right. Today, I think before the screening began, and I said, this is such an old-fashioned film, and it is not that many years ago. It's 15 years ago. But I think also, like me and Deepti, we are classmates at the Film Institute. And I think when we came out of the Film Institute and fiction filmmaking, we were also very much used to doing these very stylized shots. We didn't do much lighting here, but definitely I had a script for this film. That in itself showed another. So it's not even a passing away of analog photography, but also another kind of filmmaking. And so I never did. I think I did one more film like this, already realizing then that these aesthetics are becoming something which is harking back to a past, and have to move on into, and the whole way of looking has also changed. The cameras became lighter, and they're able to pack in much more in a small camera. So the whole aesthetics, there's a certain lightness to viewing, etc., and not structuring it in this way. This is a very structured and stylized film, which I don't know whether we'll do today. No, Deepti would like to speak about it. This is something.
The question was, is it coming to an end?
The question is it coming to an end? I think it is always being redefined. In the film, you see daguerreotypes where people had to stay steady for a very long time for a picture to be taken. Then it moved into the kind of photography where a candid moment could be shot, where people could be moving, but still you can have a photograph. Now our gazes have turned completely on ourselves, and we are our own best photographers. We can self-represent in a way that we don't have to go into a studio and always choose a backdrop, like we are the best people who can photograph ourselves.
Or be oppressed by a photographer.
Yeah. So it's constantly being redefined. I don't know if that's ever going to stop, frankly. The technology is just going to keep redefining it.
And filmmaking is also changing, and for me, this film was a challenge, because after all, a photograph is a very static subject. It's not like, real life, a lot of things are happening, moving. So how do you make a film about this subject and, still keep it moving and still keep the interest alive? So scripting the film actually was such a challenging part of it. Because and today, I think I would do the film very differently. Today, with the kind of digital cameras we have, and how much time we can spend in these places. I mean, we had a crew of 25 people, which was also forced upon us in a way, just because we had track and trolley. But today, 3 people can go and shoot in a very different way. So it would have, if I was shooting it today, it would be such a. But these things won't exist today. These things don't exist today, but it would be a very different film in stylistically.
I just wanted to add here about what you would have done today. Of course, in your own journey as a filmmaker and how you're dealing with different subjects, it would be mediated by that. But since this festival here is also about cities and urban spaces, one of the things we discovered while scripting and then finally shooting was that we actually got some money 2 years after our first visit to Calcutta, where we had met all these studio owners and, the spaces and the backdrops they had and so on, their stories. We went back 2 years later, very little had changed. It was all exactly, even the ruined studio above the coffee house was still there. The guy hadn't managed to convert it into any other kind of space. It was still full of memories and objects fallen on the floor and stuff like that. So that, I think somewhere it's also to do with a certain city, I mean, I think we're also reflecting on Kolkata and Ahmedabad and the way they are or the way they have been with photography and with themselves, within themselves. Yeah, Bombay would have been probably a very, very different story.
Bombay, it was even difficult to talk to a photographic studio owner. One, it was about money. The other, it was about time. And also the nature of memory in a city like this, where everything is changing so fast. If there was a photo studio which had been in Bombay for, say, even 70 years, and if it went away, the people wouldn't know, because, the whole population would have changed so quickly. So it was interesting that this film is in Ahmedabad and mainly in Calcutta, and then also the choice of Ahmedabad is very important. Like how we, decided what took us to Ahmedabad was 2002, the massacre in Gujarat, and then that took us there, and we wanted to know how that has it impacted photography in any way, like this sort of a Hindu thing, the revival that was happening, has it entered the photo studio? We didn't find that, but what we found was Riaz, who was such a treasure, and Hasina and his daughters, complete treasure. So it was interesting, the journey into Ahmedabad.
It was pretty nostalgic to go through your film, because I belong to Calcutta. And tell me the reason why you have chosen Calcutta especially. Although Bombay is very famous for films and pictures and everything, why Calcutta? Why did you go there especially?
Look,
So
photography in
special.
India came first to Calcutta. So there was Bone and Shepherd. And most of the, but we were unlucky because just before we reached there, Bone and Shepherd had burned down, and with it went like major, history of photography of India. Like they lost a lot of the glass negatives. And I hadn't seen Calcutta. So, but no, I was reading, before I went on this journey, I'd been reading about photography a lot. So, and a lot of these studios that I wanted to visit, photo studios, were in Calcutta. And then it was, we found a lot of old studios, but these new ones and this earlier digital take on photography was really fabulous. So it was amazing. And it was just so inventive, and people had a sense of humor, and they had the time to talk to you and share their stories. And you can only do films, in these kind of films, in these kind of places with people who are ready to give you the time of the day. Bombay was very difficult to do that, yeah.
So, in your film, you showed various clips where the concerned people were taking photographs in front of 9/11, and there was a train disaster, and then there was the famine. A few years ago, even it's a recent case where in Germany, where you have the Jewish memorial site. Even today, when lots of tourists and all, when they go and visit there, they click selfies, and especially in a site which is considered, a heritage site now, a memorial site rather. There was this artist who, after taking photographs, he had superimposed with the actual the Jewish people who are being, about to get massacred, and in that context, do you think that the idea to create an alternative space, an alternative dimension or fantasy for us, is kind of making us insensitive to issues? Would you like to comment on that?
I think why people pose before disasters, I found, like, for example, here it was very interesting in India why we found people posing against. So most of these people come from mufassils, like small areas. And this is in their bid to, identify with events that are happening outside. It is to say we are connected. Today, it's all about that we also belong to this sphere. And sometimes it can be as simple as that. And sometimes, as we conjecture in the film, it could be about mortality, that we have survived and others haven't. So there can be so many reasons, plus I think the whole thing about a spectacle, to be part of a spectacle, to make spectacles, to be a spectator, so there can be many readings into it. Whether people who go into these places and they take their selfies against, like, I've seen that in Dhaka and in, they can be multi-layered, understanding. I think to reach this conclusion that they're insensitive would be a bit superficial, I feel. If you talk to people, you realize that there can be several reasons for them doing. And anyway, insensitivity is all around us. So it's not that it gets reflected in these are hyper situations. So maybe they get, heightened in these situations, but it's all around us. Like, we know that every day, how people are actually shooting disasters or rapes or, so many of these insensitive things which are happening instead of helping the people, they're actually shooting it and sharing it. So it's something that is there.
Well, the most interesting part of the film I found was those parts where actual subjects were being shot, like there was that in Ahmedabad, for example, that group of children, and there was that guy who took his shirt off and was being Salman Khan. How are these actors? Where did you get these subjects from?
No, none of them are actors. They're all people there. In fact, that boy, what was his name? Whatever, forgetting his name now. When we reached this studio, actually what had happened, we had gone to this studio earlier and I had liked his photograph. So I had asked the photographer, and I had asked the studio owner, who's this boy, Naseem, where does he live? And that was it. And then we had decided to shoot in that studio. And it was the first day of our shoot. When we reached there, this boy was there. He was sitting there. So, somehow the studio owner, I think, had told him that, these people are going to come and shoot and all, and they were interested in your photographs. So this boy, in fact, was very interesting because he was a drug addict and a musician. And he loved taking photographs. He was addicted, a very addictive personality. So he was addicted to getting photographed. And he was an addict also. So anyway, he had heard about us. He was there, and he wanted to be part of the shoot. So we said, okay, why don't you be, how do you
so
do
it was just happenstance, these
it just happened. He just happened to be there because we didn't know where he lived or what. But we had, during our research, we had spent a lot of time, going through these photographs. These are really pokey little studios, very small, but they hide a treasure, So we went through, very painstakingly, we went through hundreds of photographs, and then we would come across something interesting, and then we would ask the studio owner, do you know these guys? So he had said he comes often. So maybe we had said if he's, I don't remember now, it's a long time ago. But he happened to be there that day. वो तो उस ज़माने में mobiles भी नहीं होते थे. So we were lucky.
मोबाइल से उसका बचता है ना बीच में.
हाँ होते थे. Yeah, शुरुआत थी, but he didn't have a mobile or we didn't have his number. But we were lucky, he was there.
This is not a question, it's just a comment on your wonderful film. Very seldom in a film do you see, the first thought that I had was very seldom in a film do you see the past and the present in the same frame. You'll have in particular a street scene from Calcutta and a photograph on the left. And I was thinking, wow, this just doesn't happen, the past and the present together. But you have other images in the film also where you have fantasy and reality in the same frame. You have the paintings, the backgrounds that are moved away, and then you can see something realistic. And after I thought about this, I was thinking, really, in that first example, that again is sort of fantasy and reality, because the photograph is posed. There's a lot about the posing of photographs. I think this is a remarkable film. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
If you have any comments.
See, we could have made it just here and now sort of a film, like, just shot a lot of people and had fun and laughed through the film. That could have been one kind of a film. But we decided not to very deliberately do that film. Just go in photo studios and we shoot with various people and have interviews. We decided to do a film that could be more reflective. And so we also designed, and one more coincidence, like we were holding up the photograph of this two young girls, and then suddenly on the side, there was those two old women who were sitting there in the background, holding hands, friends. And so people said, how did that happen? Again, it was just, it just happened. They just came and sat there and they were there in the frame. So somehow, they say that things conspire. When you're putting things together, things also conspire to make it happen. And those were like Naseem being there and finding Hasina and their daughters. I think things come together. They're anyway there, but when you decide to put these things in one frame, things also come together. But there was definitely a decision of looking at these photographs and the city together. But then reality also happened in the same frame. So, thank you.